Hi, it's Cayman Reynolds, and welcome to tonight's live chat. We have a lot to discuss. It is March, and it is busy down here in the southeast and many parts of the southern and warmer parts of the United States. If you're from another country, let us know where you're from, or if you're around here, let us know. And heck, even if you're from somewhere completely different, let me know as well. Sorry, I had a big thumbprint on that and just had to get rid of it. Nova Scotia, Canada. All right. So we've got stuff from all over the place. There we go. Wow. A lot of people already commenting in. I just opened it up myself, so I'm going to have to catch up to some of these things. Frozen in Alabama. Yeah, we're getting a nice little freeze here. Speaking of which, I left my window open today. This is one of the problems we have in Tennessee is we have this warm winter that goes back and forth, and there's a lot of in-between days in the upper 40s, mid 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and you get a good wood stove like I have, and it's either a little too cool or you're burning yourself out of your own house and you got to open the windows. So the windows have been open probably 4 hours today, even though it hasn't even gotten to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, weird how y'all want to talk about the cold, but I'm probably the only one that took my snowmobile to the hives today. Yeah, no snowmobile, unfortunately. Are you back from the sun? Oh, yeah, I've been back for a while. I got a little bit of a tan, not a whole lot, a little bit of improvement. I was in my bees a couple days ago going through the yards. It was impressive how light some of them were, and we had to give some of them as much as 2 gallons of sugar syrup to get them close to where they needed to be. Great Tiger Nation of Louisiana. That's all I'm going to say. And Chris, for some reason, I can't see you at all, so I don't know why that is. I can see you visually in the background, and you can kind of give me the don't say that Cayman stuff. All right, Central Kentucky. Question: I drank a whole bottle of swarm lure. Tasted like afterbirth of a Mongolian bush ape. Gave me bad gas, indigestion, and diarrhea, but I still ain't caught no swarms. Should I drink another? At this point, Mike, why not? I'm sure that was all tongue in cheek, I hope. I actually know some people who were going around with essential oils and recommending people to take them orally and instead of using them topically. And it really messed up their guts. What a lot of people don't understand, and you might know this, essential oils are really good at killing bacteria, good, bad, ugly, all that stuff. Makes me wonder why some of these companies say that they're brood boosters and stimulants when they're actually really good at killing healthy gut microbiomes. Anyways, snake oil. I think my hives are dying to might be a bad spring. Ian, I hope you're joking. I haven't watched any of your latest videos, so I'm not up to date. I apologize. I haven't been paying attention, but I hope that that's not the case and spring's not as rough as you think it might be. But mite populations are rough, especially this time of the year. Waist high snowbanks in upstate New York. Woo-wee. Good evening, Cayman. I'm running single 10-frame deeps this year for the first time instead of double deeps for honey. Question is, how much brood would you recommend in my deep for a good honey yield? Hey, Ian, if you don't mind, would you weigh in on this one a little bit? I would not call myself an expert when it comes to single brood management. What I do works really good for me. I usually cut mine back to about 5 frames of brood, but I don't have monster long honey flows either, or where I can get hundreds of pounds. I can do 100 pounds, but I usually cut it down to 5, and it really depends on the frames. Am I leaving 5 frames with 50% that are 50% covered in brood, or am I leaving 5 frames that are all sheets of brood? I kind of take it on a per colony basis, but it's somewhere around there. And I definitely always run 10 frames in my brood nests unless I'm back to a double deep system when the honey flow is over and the honey supers are removed, or it's right now before the honey flow starts, and I'll run 8 frames up top and a 2-gallon mother load feeder. By the way, they just came out with another frame feeder for those who like the 1.5 gallon. Some people like those better than the 2-gallon frame feeder. That gives you a little bit more room to pull it out. The 8 frames and 2-gallon is a little tight, especially if you've been letting your frames get a little fat. But both of those are a great feeder. I really like the 2 gallons quite a bit, but the 1.5 is loved by a lot of commercials. Well, that depends. Come on, don't be like that, man. 100% survival so far, 5 for 5. That's awesome. So one of the things that I'd like to say real quick at the beginning of the video is there is this bee book right here. I'm a big honey bee fan, as you know, but I'm also a book snob, if you don't realize that. I love to read, always have, and I don't have enough time for it these days. But whenever I come across a good book, especially a beekeeping one, I absolutely love it. And so this is a new one. And right now, I've worked it to where if you type in Cayman 10 at checkout, you can get 10% off. And it's really good. It's a good book. And there's not a whole lot of books I like to recommend because most kid books, especially, are just terrible to read or they're not very accurate. And I just love it. It reminds me of the books that I got to read as a kid and my grandparents would read to me that were like illustrated from the 50s and 60s and 40s, where we just had over the top illustrations. This is amazing. All right. And that is, let's see. There was a question and I just missed it. Surely you jest, sir. All right, here's lost one hive, all dead in bottom, tongues hanging out. What's going on? All dead in bottom, tongues hanging out. Sounds like starvation, possibly. I actually came across a hive 2 days ago that starved, and it was my fault 100%. I've got busy doing other things and speaking in different places and didn't take care of my bees quite as good as I should in this yard, and this one was light, and I gave it something earlier this year, but it was not enough. And I didn't get back to it in time. And I lost about 5 good frames of brood and probably about 8 or so frames of bees. And there were some bees with heads in the cells, which is telltale starvation, and just a bunch of bees on the bottom board. And a couple of them were still alive, barely moving, but they just died because they just could not heat the colony and ran out of energy. So this time of the year, definitely be watching that. Cayman, where can we find the 2023 Hive Life Honey Contest winners list? That's a good question. I don't know. I'll have to contact the honey show folks. This is part of the problem that we have, everybody. We've grown way too fast, just way too fast. And so it's primarily still just Laurel and I doing everything. And from day to day, we are just freaking out all the time because we have way too much work to do and not enough time to do it. And it's little things like that that get put to the wayside. And we have very good intentions to get those up soon and a lot of other things. But this is why it takes so long for us to get the Hive Life videos up or for us to get this video done or that video done. Our capabilities and our ambition don't seem to be on the same page. However, I really hope to be able to have a full-time employee within the next few months. So that would help me out tremendously. Hey, Cayman, I live in Northern California. I have 2 hives bursting at the seams, double deeps. I want to split to avoid swarms. How many frames of brood do you recommend removing? Thanks as always. Thanks for coming on, Northern California. So do you know how far away you are from your flow? That will depend on it to a degree. But honestly, right now, the other day I was going through big colonies and we were just pulling frames of brood, and I had a Jester Easy nuke box, and we would fill that thing full of brood and bees, pulling these colonies back. And then I would get to a couple smaller colonies and I would plug in some of those frames and beef them up. And just as soon as I thought I was going to clear that nuke box, here we go, filling it back up again with another 3 or 4 frames. So I don't know how far you are from your flow, but right now I'm trying to keep mine cut back a pretty good bit. I'm cutting them back to about 5 frames of brood if they're really large. So I mean, if there's 6 frames of brood, I'm probably not going to fool with cutting them back. But some of these are just these packed doubles like what you're describing, and we're cutting them back quite a bit, partially to make nukes up to sell, but also to keep them from swarming, because this is the time of the year they will start thinking about swarming here in Tennessee, and we are early. So you can cut them back. Maybe you can get some queens out there in California, and you can make some of those splits or something like that, and pull them back. But it'd be better to cut them back a little bit too much than not quite enough, and curb the swarming. And then if you regret pulling them back quite that much, you're like, I wish I'd have left an extra frame of brood. Go back in there 10 days later and pull out a frame of brood and plug it back in. All right. So I can't seem to click anything. I'm trying to. It doesn't seem to be working. There we go. Andrew Munn, Cayman, where can I get some good queens or great queens, dead mites, and good nutrition swag? That is a great question. That's another one of the things that we need to get around to is more merchandise, because a lot of people have been asking me for hats, shirts, and all that kinds of stuff. We just don't have the time for it right now. But right now we're just teaching how to get great queens, kill those dead mites, and do all that other stuff. So as far as the nutrition goes, Andrew, we just get Apis Biologics stuff to help out with that. You would know all about that, I think, wouldn't you? All that Canadian rocket fuel stuff. And there's Tom Nolan from Toronto. He is one of the stooges there at the Nod, selling the formic acid, and that's something I'm going to be trying this year. I've really put it off for several years, and I'm going to be trying a certain bit of one of my honey yards with some of the Formic Pro and seeing about doing an early knockback. I've never tried that before, and I know some guys who say it works really good for them to do it early in the season while the temperatures are still in the 70s and not getting crazy high. And then the formic acid does a really good job knocking the mites really far back, and the temperature is just ideal for it. So I'm going to see how that works for me this year. I came in, Todd, from California, planning to make some great queens. Been pounding mites, but found some in the drone brood of my largest colony. Would you still use the nurse bees for your starter? Well, it depends on how many you're finding. Like sometimes you just find some in the drone brood, and it's not as bad as you think, because that is where they go to first. And that's why typically in spring we just don't see a whole lot of impacts to our colonies, because they go for those drones, and the drones take the damage and all the stuff. And so that really doesn't get into the cycle of our females, which are, really maintaining the colony. Maybe this would be a good time, Todd, to do an alcohol wash and see where that colony is at. And you can do it, but just keep in mind that you're going to, no matter what you do, you're going to be throwing some mites in there. And sometimes you just end up with the colony. You've been pounding the mites away, and there's still some good bees, some strong bees, but they have a little bit more mites than you would like. And that's, again, why I'm contemplating doing a Formic Pro treatment early in the season. And just, it's always good to stay ahead of the mites, even if you don't think you need it. Let me shut the window. It is starting to cool down, and it is about 55 degrees in my office right now. Ooh, burr, burr, burr. All right. One of the things I was going to say real quick is we have bees still for sale. So I'm selling nucleus colonies. They're 5-frame nukes. They will be ready, I believe it's the 26th, and then we're doing the first weekend in May. So if you need some nukes, we can get you taken care of. Obviously, the pickup is here in Gainesboro, Tennessee. And you can email me at tennesseesbees@gmail.com or hivelifeconference@gmail.com. Just let me know you need some nukes. First come, first serve on that. All right. I'll be installing 6 packages at the end of April in Massachusetts. How soon before I do an alcohol wash? Good question, Paul. Sounds like you're already thinking ahead. Honestly, I wouldn't even bother doing a wash on those until, oh goodness. So you're doing it late April, May, June. Probably mid-July, late July. Basically, what I found with small colonies like that is it's going to take a couple months unless they just come riddled. So most of the guys that are down in Georgia and the big package producers are good about selling packages that don't have high mite loads. It still wouldn't hurt though if you have oxalic acid vapor to maybe come back in 7 days after you've installed the package. And after the queen's been laying a good bit, just give them a light oxalic acid dose if you have that and just clean them up really good. But sometime in July would probably be a good time, and it probably won't be too high at that point. Hey, Cayman, how do you think is the best way to bank virgins, and how long can they be banked and still get mated and be dependable? Don, that is a great question. I am the wrong person really for that one. I never have attempted to bank virgins. I never want to even attempt it. I don't like fooling with them at all. From the guys that I know, you need to set up a really good environment, stress-free, plenty of food, lots of nurse bees to virgin bee ratio. And I don't know all the little bitty details. I know Richard Noel does a lot of that, Don. I don't fool with that. I'll bank some queens, but I don't even like banking those queens. I really, these days, I just raise queens for nukes to sell, and then the rest of them are for myself, and I never fool with that. I will put multiple queen cells in colonies and just let them fight it out before I will bank virgins. Ooh, cold brew coffee. We have a hive that is really light on food. When we put top feeder of sugar syrup 1-to-1, they won't touch it. Is this a problem? Southwest MO. I don't know how strong that colony is, Tyler. If it's a strong colony and they're healthy, they should be taken 1-to-1. I actually had a colony today and I popped it. It's about 7 frames strong. But I mean, everything's just right. The brood patterns are good. The population's growing. They're healthy and no problems. Just fed them 2 days ago with a 1-gallon motherload frame feeder. And I peeked in it today because I just can't help it. And they were sucking the syrup out of that like crazy. And that's a frame feeder, and a top feeder should perform better, I'm thinking. So I don't know. What kind of population are we talking about here? Can they maintain the cluster and then afford to expand outside of that? And in Southwest Missouri, I think they should be eating. Hey, Ryland, thank you so much for donating to our YouTube channel and helping us out here. Congratulations on getting some bees. So you'll be picking them up tomorrow with temps in the 30s. Should I wait to install on Monday with temps in the mid 40s? 30s, 40s, it really doesn't matter to me, Ryland. I'll install them in either temperature. Those bees personally will do fine, but when it's this cold, I recommend shaking them. So if it was upper 40s or above, I have some videos on this where you just stick the package in there and let them work their way out of it over to the queen, but you only do that when it's quite warm. And I still check them at the end of the day, but you need to shake them out. So if you got a double deep system, get your foundations or your comb in that bottom box and then put your queen down into the center and then put an extra deep box or medium or whatever, and it's empty, no frames in it. And just shake all the bees right on top of that queen, and so that they'll cluster around her and she's kept warm. And you'll want to wear your bee suit. Sometimes packages just don't care if you're there, and then sometimes you definitely will need that bee suit. and make sure there's some food contact. So you can take that can that comes with it, excuse me, and you can get a couple sticks to raise it. Keep that extra empty box on top and have that can directly over the cluster. Don't have it directly over the queen, but have it close by. You just in case you don't want any syrup dripping down into the queen cage, and just pop the cork on that queen cage on the side that has the candy, and that'll be fine. You can do it in the 30s. All they need is to stay clustered around that queen and food contact. If you have any frames of honey or sugar syrup from another colony you already have, you can literally pull that and put that in there next to the queen if the other colonies can spare it, and that works good. I'm really not worried too much about temperature as long as those factors are there. Good luck with your bees, and let me know how it goes. Cayman, what was the attendance at Hive Life this year, and are you planning to go bigger? The hard questions. Dang it, the hard questions. So there's like 1,800 attendees. And then if you count the staff, the speakers, and then all of the vendors and change, there was 2,000 people there easily. And so, the problem is there's a lot of people that want to come, and we are growing so fast. I mean, it's been 3 conferences, but that's been in the span of just a little over 2 years that we've pulled those off. And I don't consider myself a conference expert. I consider myself a beekeeper. So I think we do a good job there in understanding what beekeepers like and what they want. But as far as organizing these events, I'm not so good. So trying to juggle that with all of my regular bee stuff and the YouTube videos. And that's kind of why my YouTube videos haven't grown like I would like them to, is because of Hive Life primarily. So that's kind of a constant frustration. It seems like each one's chipping away at the other. But currently, I don't know if we're going to grow a lot or not. And that's going to frustrate a lot of people, and myself included, because I'm the one that's going to get 1,000 emails of why can't you get me in? So anyways, long story short, we don't know yet. And I don't know yet. So this could be good. It could be bad. It's always epic. Always. Cayman, how's your bees doing this year with global patties compared to other years with Ultra Bee? I've had good years with Ultra Bee, especially in the past when they were a little bit better than what they are now. Man Lake says that they've reverted back to the original recipe, but I disagree. It's not as good as it used to be. It's still a good product though, and it's a pollen patty. The global is better, and the bees consume it faster. I've had great results with it, but when you have good bees, they're going to eat any of the stuff. Just some of them they waste less, and some of it you get a little bit more out of. I prefer the global patties. I go to uh, Hive Life. I get them brought in, but when I run out of them, I can get them from the Bee Supply in small quantities, and that's what I did when I was testing them out the first time. I talked to a couple guys that said they preferred them now over Ultra Bee. So long story short, the ones at the conference are a little bit different too. They also have the Canadian rocket fuel stuff mixed in. So I think the nutrition is quite a bit more full in the patties. So I've had great results with them, but ultimately, whatever you can get access to for a fair price. If it's going to cost you $4 a pound for a global patty versus being able to do 2 pounds for Ultra Bee, as a business, I'm going Ultra Bee. Okay. So there's a balance to this. The global's better, but there's financial pros and cons. Cayman, is this cold weather that's coming your way going to negatively affect our bees? Oh yeah, absolutely. It has slowed them down a good bit, and my mulberry tree had leaves about this long on it. They are completely black and shriveled. So it's going to affect some of the early pollens, and hopefully the weather will clear up and we'll be fine. The sky isn't falling at this point, but every year's different. It's too early to be able to judge where we're going to be, but the big colonies go through this stuff without any issues as long as they have plenty of food. It's the ones that are right on the cusp of turning the corner that this kind of weather really hits. That's right. Roll Tide. Thank you very much. Thank you. Cayman, have you tried a flyback split yet, and how did it work out? I've done that years ago, a few different times, and you know, they're all right. I don't like them for the fact they imbalance the colonies quite so much, and I don't see a need. The primary reason for a flyback split, and let me explain this a little bit for those who don't know quite what that is we are making a split and we're taking, at least this is the way I was taught how to do it. We're taking most of the combs and resources, but we're leaving that colony in its original location. I always left the original queen there, and then you have all the forager bees in that location. And so I always left the original queen, but you take all the brood and resources by and large, and you make a split, and then you just leave all the forager bees there with the queen. And because it's just basically old bees and there's no comb or very little to speak of, I usually leave 1 or 2 frames of brood, uncapped brood. Then you just feed, and you draw comb like that. That was the way I was taught to do it. It's not quite the way everyone does it. What I do these days, though, is when the honey flows over, we quickly strip all the supers off. And now we have about 3 deeps worth of bees in a single deep box with tons of brood and a queen, and they've got to be fed a lot of food. And I'll just feed them, just feed tons and tons of food, and they are going to draw that comb. The only time they will not draw combs out if you do it quickly. You can't wait a month after the population has declined a good bit. You can still draw some combs, but it's difficult. If you do it immediately after the honey flow, you have this big population of old bees and some more still on the way, and they can produce a lot of wax. And just feed very thin syrup. It doesn't even have to be 1-to-1. And we are just going to feed. And the only time they won't draw combs good is if they have a poor queen or are going through a super seizure, unless your mites are just out of this world high. But I'm just not a fan of the flyback split personally, because for the amount of work that I have to do and thought and effort, I just feel like there's more efficient ways to do it. Hey, Paul Martins, thank you so much for helping us out and joining us again. Thank you. And thanks for liking our videos and our chats. I hope that they help folks out a little bit. We definitely love beekeeping and all that kind of stuff. And I was talking to a company today. It was Thorn Manufacturing. We're discussing a new product that they're trying to develop, and I'm pretty excited about it. Can't tell you quite yet, but they are beekeepers as well, and so are we. And one of the things that I was telling him really concerns me a lot. I've had this conversation with Ian and Bob sitting together, and Richard down at dinner, and Thorn was there as well, is that YouTube is really an awesome tool, and I like it. But the problem is sometimes we have these companies that, they understand how it works. They will throw products at us, and they want us just to recommend them because we get a free product. And some of the YouTubers are doing that, and they'll get something that, in my opinion, as a beekeeper, not as a YouTuber, is a very subpar product, and they're pushing it on our videos, on the YouTube videos. And that really impacts the industry, I think, more negatively than many people realize. Our money must go to the companies that actually care and do the right things. And so that's what I want to spend more time doing with the YouTube channel. Is some people don't like it when I do product reviews, but I want to be educated on what's in the industry. And I would love for you all to be able to make purchases that make you happy that you made the purchases. And the companies that are the best for us are the ones making the money. All right, off the soapbox. Next question. We should hire Cayman to put on Hive Life Canada. No, I'm too offensive to be up in Canada. The Hive Life World Tour. No, the Canadians are great. 4,000. Excuse me, 4,000 attendees is a good number, Cayman. Pierce, you guys are trying to kill me. Cayman, did I hear right, is the American Beekeeping Federation moving their day? Yes, they are. They're moving it to a week after ours, and that's good for everybody. So that's really nice of them to do so. So when it comes to Hive Life Canada, I just have to jump back into that real quick. Is that that would be fun? I actually was asked to speak in Canada later this year, and unfortunately, I had to decline. I'm going to be doing a lot less speaking engagements. That's really taking a lot of time away from videos, and it's taking a lot of time away from my family. So that's one of the things that we have decided to eliminate by and large. So I did 14 talks last year. I only have 2 more on the books this year, and I have none for 2024. And I'm not going to do very many more. And I really enjoy them. I've been in Georgia, North Carolina, had a great time, great time. But I've just got to, we've got to shake things up. And the YouTube channel is where this all started. And I feel like we're not doing that as good as we can. But Hive Life Canada, Hive Life A, that's what we'll call it. All right, all right. Now you do it, Ian. What mite treatment applications don't react well together? Well, I have never doubled like a treatments up intentionally, except once, and so I don't have a lot of experience, and I don't think I should have a lot of experience because as far as applying them at the same times, Mike. I definitely would not want to do oxalic acid, formic at the same time, thiamol and formic acid, because all of these treatments stress the bees out. There's not a treatment out there that does not stress the bees out. The goal is the mites are stressing the bees this much, and the treatment stresses the colony about that much. And after the treatment's over, it's over. And the mites should be way down into here. And now there's no treatment stress, and hopefully no mite stress. But some of these treatments, especially at high temperatures, can be a problem. So as far as applying them at the same time, I don't recommend that. I did use Apivar and oxalic acid vapor one time together. The Apivar, though, is not something that I use on a regular basis anymore. I just don't think I get good kill with it. Javier, thanks for donating so much. And what are my chances of catching a swarm in a new box in an open pasture? Any tips? So I don't know if you have any old combs or anything like that. Brood comb is fantastic to draw bees in. Lemongrass essential oil would be good. Maybe a little bit of anise oil if you do not have lemongrass available to you. There's also products like Swarm Commander and different things like that. But ultimately, a little bit of brood comb or beeswax or propolis, something to make it, the more you can make it smell like a hive, the better off you are. And the lemongrass, you can go too far, but what are your chances? That's impossible to say because a lot of it depends on location. In areas where there's a lot of commercial beekeepers, and more importantly, where there is really good natural flows, like there are some beekeepers who have flows that last 4 months, 3 to 4 months out of the years, they're getting pollens and nectar, which just that's amazing to me to be able to get as much flow. And some of them even get more than that. So in areas like that, bees do way better. And so you're going to end up with a lot more swarms and typically commercial beekeepers in that area too. So depends on the hot spots. Here in my area, I think you have probably out of 10 traps, maybe a 4 out of 10 chance, 5 out of 10 in a good year. So you're not the greatest in the world, but a lot depends on your location, especially if you're parked next to some hobby beekeepers that aren't good about keeping their bees in. Or maybe me when I'm working on Hive Life and not on my bees. Good luck with that. And thanks for the donation. Trying my hand at queen grafting this year. Can I just put cells straight into a nuke once they are capped? Or should I use an incubator to hatch them and put them in as virgins? Brown family apiaries, I do not like fooling with virgins. Do not like it. They're sensitive. There are people who can handle them, and I have not learned how to do so. I'm good at killing virgins. They're sensitive. cells are way better. I highly recommend let those bees cap those queen cells. You can keep it in an incubator until you're ready to put them in. I usually wait till day 10, but if I'm in a rush, I'll put them in at day 9 or heck, even day 8. But you just have to be more careful. Day 10's preferred. They're stronger. And then I usually use queen cell protectors from JZ Beezy. Not necessary, but I do it anyways. And then I put them right next to the brood, and that works great. And you can candle your queen cells. If you look that up, you can make a queen candling system. And this can be really useful because if you do a lot of cells, like 100, if you catch a couple cells that are duds, well, that really saves you a lot of headache because you would have just invested that dud cell into a mating nuke and you'd have just lost that production time out of that mating nuke. So I really just like queen cells. Queen cells are an awesome way to requeen an operation. Hello from Ohio. Have you tried a Damari split? And if so, how early do you need to set that up before the flow starts to make it worth doing? Um, I've never done that before. I have had that question asked of me actually a lot recently, and I apparently need to learn more about it. I know just enough to be dangerous, Jim. And I apologize. I'll have to look into that one. I installed my first 2 packages this past Saturday. I'm feeding 1-to-1. I opened up to check the queen was released and to see the queen was released in the feeder amount. When should I open up to check the frame/queen? So if you can get a nice mid 50-degree day or warmer, that would be great. If it's cooler, you can still get in there and check. You want to make sure that there's plenty of food going in, especially if you have just foundations for your bees to start drawing on, Pat. And hopefully, you'll get some warm weather and you can check them. And you don't have to go through every frame. A lot of times what you'll do is, maybe those bees are occupying 4 or 5 frames. Pull out some of those foundations to the side, scoot some frames over, and pull out 1 or 2 frames at the most. And there's brood, there's eggs. That's what we want to see. How are the food levels? Are they taking food good? And if all is well, shut it up. And if you're quick, you can make that a 5-minute process. And that's a really good thing to do. You could check them once a week. There are some people that say don't do it, but as a new beekeeper, you don't have to spend a lot of time in there, but it is good to get in there and get some experience and stay ahead of them. Once your bees get to where they're drawing on that 8th frame in a 10-frame box, then I would recommend putting another box on. And then you'll take 1 frame of eggs or larvae and pull that up into your next brood chamber and put that right above the brood below. So all that heat goes right up there, and that will really help them draw it out. If you wait till they're drawing on the 9th or 10th frame, they could plug up and the queen runs out of room to lay, and then you end up with them wanting to swarm. So it's good to stay ahead of the bees like that. And same for the second box. Once they have it mostly full, then you can add a honey super on or whatever you want to add and work on getting that drawn as well. Good luck, Pat, and maybe we'll see you on another live chat soon with more questions on how your bees are doing. Hi, Cayman. I'm in Hungary. What are the plants you usually go to in Tennessee? What flowers, trees are the most important for the honey flow? Great question, and I really like talking about our plants here. So there are a lot of different things in spring, so many, and I learn a few new ones each year. As far as significant honey production plants, though, definitely blackberry blossom. These are just wild blackberries. They are wonderfully consistent compared to some plants, and they produce a really good nectar, delicious honey. We can get black locust and we can get tulip poplar, but they're both earlier and more fragile to winds and frosts. And we will get basswood or what's called linden, which is a wonderful honey. It's a great wood as well. And so I've got some seeds that I need to be working on getting planted. We have our clover and a few other odds and ends, and we have autumn olive, also known as Russian olive. And then we will have a few other odds and ends, a little bit of sweet clover towards the end of the flow, but not a whole lot. There's a lot of little contributors, red bud, but one of my favorites is a flower called fringed Phacelia, and it is a gorgeous little flower. It doesn't produce a honey crop. It comes in like the red bud early in the season. It's just starting to bloom, and it kind of pushes the bees to get to that point. And it's just a lot of gorgeous flowers around here. Let's see. How do I get my husband to pay attention to me instead of spending all the time with bees? Oh man. I don't know, Jennifer. This would be very hypocritical of me to say anything. Thankfully, how do you know when these kind of conversations come up? Are you spying on me in the other room on your phone or something? No, you just know. Well, that's creepy, is what that is. Um, yeah. So my wife gave me the eye when you brought that up, Jennifer. So I don't have the answers for you. I can just say that I'll pray for your husband that he might see reason for his sake, if nobody else's. Because if we know what's good for us, guys, we're going to pay attention to our wives. Um, but all jokes aside, maybe he'll get more into bees. Um, uh, I'm you both can get into bees a little bit more together. Excuse me. Boy, these delicate conversations, they always get me every time. Is there a mite treatment safe to use close to the honey flow? So there are. I don't know how close you are, Kim. So you definitely need to read the label on these things because some of them are quite a bit different. And some of them don't work good at certain temperatures either. So you can use Apogard thymol prior to the honey flow. And basically, when the treatment is done within like a day, you can throw the supers on. Because by the time the bees start loading it up, it's going to dissipate out of there and all that kind of stuff. But thymol does not work good in the 60s and low 70s. It does if the temperatures are getting higher than that in the middle of the day, you're good. But if your highs are kind of low 70s or under, thymol doesn't work quite as good. I don't want Apivar on close to the time that I'm doing that. Oxalic acid vapor would be just fine. It really starts to degrade within 24 hours. So that's not an issue. Now, formic acid that Nod produces, that can be used when honey supers are on. So there are some options. And there's a lot of professional beekeepers who treat right before the honey flow to get the bees nice and cleaned up so the mite population is not impacting the colony during that period. And when the honey flow is done, it's not like, oh my goodness, the mite population's high. It should be in a good situation. Okay. How many hives do you normally lose over winter? It's a good question, and it depends on the year a little bit as well. This has been a very mild year, so it's been easier to keep bees alive. I don't have an accurate number, but we're definitely below 15%. It might not even be 10% at this point, and the bees look really good, actually a little scary good, if I'm being honest. So, because I'm like, I'm a little bit behind. Ideally, we would keep it below 20%. I would like to see it below 10%. A lot of it depends on how much work you put into your bees before they go into winter. So here in Tennessee, the toughest months are late July, August, and September. If your bees go into October with a robust population that has never known any type of nutritional stress as far as running low on honey, running low on sugar syrup, or running low on proteins, they are going to go into winter looking awesome. And the mites can't be high either. So if you're going into winter with a really healthy population in Tennessee, unless they starve out, I mean, you're not losing those bees. We don't have real winters here. So, and that's basically anywhere you go, though. So summer and late summer management, early fall really pays big dividends on your overall success. And having young queens really helps as well. I've probably had 3 or 4 colonies I found in the last couple of weeks that the queen was laying extremely poorly or sometimes gone or a drone layer. So there's always a few of those, and those colonies have to be combined this time of the year to other colonies. So you're going to lose hives. That's why if you're really wanting to have 5 hives for honey production, you need to go into winter with 5 production hives and then 3 other colonies, whether that's nukes that you're overwintering with fresh young queens to replace any issues that you have. That's a great system. Anybody I know that is wanting to really be successful consistently, you got to have those insurance colonies, those backup plans. And then if you have too many bees, you sell them. Easy to do. Cayman, do you still roll wax on your foundation? Yeah, I still do. It's a quick and easy method. You can, once you master it and you have just a little crock pot, we have a video on that on our YouTube channel. Obviously, you have seen it. Some people may have not. Having a good coat of wax makes a monstrous difference on how quickly the bees draw the comb, how uniform that is, and that can help prevent swarming if they are quicker about drawing it out. It also is better to get it drawn quick because your flow might be gone in 2 weeks. So if you can get it all drawn out in a 10-day period instead of a, I don't know, 20-day period, you'll get it done before that flow is over. So we still roll it on. You can do hundreds of sheets very, very fast. I can't remember what we said. You can definitely do way over 100 sheets an hour once you've mastered it properly. And it's very inexpensive to do. You can dip them if you have a big vat of beeswax, but most people don't. And single coat wax foundation on plastic is just too little. It's too thin. It should be thick. You should feel that the foundations are gummy, and the quality of wax is really important too. Are they using subpar low grade wax that's harder and darker? It's hard to tell when you're just looking at it. Or are they using gummy cappings wax? And if there's a lot of excess, the bees can mold that and move it around a little bit. All right. I don't know why, but I cannot click on these questions. We need a Cayman. Oh, whoa. I'm like 20 minutes behind on these questions. Goodness gracious. Cayman, regarding your busy schedule, life is a marathon. You can sprint from time to time, but you have to keep a pace to make it to the finish line. Always keep your faith and family first. I really appreciate that, Russell. And you are right. That's why we're starting to really have some serious discussions, Laurel and I, about kind of where things are at. Because at what point are we done sprinting and we just sprint all the time? We love what we do, and that's kind of what's so hard about it is when you really like doing it, you push, and there's a lot of need, and we get a lot of messages from you guys, and we love to answer. And we love to write back, and we like to be able to be all things for all people, but honestly, we can't. I had a guy show up today unannounced, and he wanted to be able to get some hands-on experience, and I wish I could do that, but I can't open those floodgates. I don't have the time, and this is my private life. This is, I don't get a lot of time to myself as it is. So yeah, it's a weird situation to be in, one I never expected to happen for sure. So I'm very thankful, but also my kids are needing more time, and I need that for myself too. I want to be a little selfish. Do you prefer nukes or packages? Yes. It really depends on the situation. If it's a good quality nuke with a good queen that was raised in the nuke and built up the nuke, then I want that one. And as long as it's a clean nuke, nukes can have a lot of mites and problems. Packages typically are pretty clean, but not always. I'll never forget a friend of mine in Maryland. Excuse me. He sent me a picture of some packages that were locally made up from some treatment-free stock. And he had a oxalic acid vaporizer. And I told him, I said, hit him before they cap the brood. And sure enough, he did. He sent me all 3 of the Hive sticky boards. And there was like 400 plus mites on each one. So he treated them again and got a couple hundred more. And there were just tons of mites in these 3 pounds of packages. And that would just been a horrible way for those bees to start. So it really just depends. Packages have their own issues. If the queen is really good, if it's a high quality queen in a package, they can perform very well. But the earliest packages can sometimes have issues. Speaking of which, I'm going down to Georgia. And I don't play fiddle, so I'm not going to challenge the devil to a fiddle contest like Charlie Daniels. But I do love that song. I'm going to be going all the way down to Rossman this next coming week, and they said they had some extra packages. So I am having to get some for the research that we're doing. So I received a grant. I've been working with some of the folks here at Tennessee, and they won't let me use my own bees for it. I have to buy bees from somebody else. I was already going down to Rossman anyways, and Rossman has been our biggest supporter at Hive Life financially. And so we really appreciate them down there at Rossman. So I'm going to go down there and I'm going to get these packages. And when I come back up, if anybody needs some packages, email me and you can get them. It'll be next week, though. You'll have to pick them up next week. And we won't be using any of these packages for, any of the nukes that we're selling. Those are totally different in a separate entity or a separate thing altogether. But if anybody does need some packages and wants some additional ones, you'll have to meet me somewhere between Tennessee and Georgia next week. So send me an email if you need anything. If not, I'll just video the experience and let you know how it goes. G'day, Cayman from Australia. I have recently put a run of queen cells into nukes. The workers filled all the frames with nectar. Do they make room for the queen to lay when she is ready? If they have room to go, so if there's a good population of bees and they're strong and healthy, and they've filled a bunch of the frames with nectar, and the queen comes out and she is a good queen ready to lay, they will, as soon as she's ready to start laying some eggs, shift that up to either other combs or they'll start drawing some new wax. If you have some additional space, that might be necessary if the flow continues to be really strong, though. But typically, once the queen comes back and she's a good laying queen, she's going to force them, and they're going to want to clear room for her to lay. And so they're either going to draw some wax for you or they're going to move that out of the way to some other combs they already have. I don't think, Don, I'm coming through Alabama. I'll have to look at the directions. I'm pretty sure it's a straight shot down through Chattanooga, Georgia, and going through Atlanta, which I think is probably where Johnny rosined up that fiddle and fought the devil with all that, because Atlanta seems to be that place. I hate driving through Atlanta so bad. However, it might be something that we could do. And if anyone has a bee club, even if it's further up north or something like that, and your bee club needs 50 packages or something like that, I don't have a ton of room, but we can work something out if you have a bunch of people that need some packages or something like that. Let's see. So Rainer Ike says, and good to see you on, Rainer. So Rainer was one of the I don't think I'm saying his name right again. Rainier. I think that's correct. So he is one of the young guys that was there at Hive Life. He's basically a young adult, but to all the rest of us, he's still a kid, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But he's got a YouTube channel. You give it a look, and we're really excited with all the things that we're seeing the young men and women doing after Hive Life, and we hope that they continue to do that. It takes a lot of time and work to build anything, but we hope that they continue to stick with beekeeping. I think there's a lot of opportunity for those willing to work. So his question is, do you see lower acceptance of queen cells after you cage a queen and add a cell back? So I assume this would be queen rearing. Do you see lower acceptance of queen cells after you cage a queen and add a cell back? So maybe give a little bit more explanation on the situation there. Is this when you're grafting or when you're trying to introduce cells? Hey, Cayman, really enjoy getting to see you and Corey Stevens at the North Carolina Beekeepers Association conference. When you were here, I was at 5 hives, already up to 6. All right, that's the right direction, Stephen, and it was good getting to see you there. That was a fun conference. I really enjoyed that one in North Carolina. Of course, I enjoy most of them I go to, but the North Carolina one had a lot of energy, and it's a lot of fun this time of the year, and it was run a lot differently than some of them that I've been to, and we really talked a lot of bees there, so that was quite a bit of fun. Cayman, are you still working with the X yard? How is it doing? So it lost about 40% of its colonies, John. Let me give you guys kind of a verbal update. I was just thinking about this last night that I've got to compile this data. I've kind of had a little bit of an issue with the data gathering as far as having help to do it. So ultimately, I'm going to have to simplify things a little bit because obviously I'm not getting things done fast enough. But here's what we learned from the experimental yard last year. So we had, and this I think was awesome to see this happen. We washed 3 different times last year, alcohol washes. So each wash euthanizes roughly 300 bees, and we counted bees, we counted mites, and there was a lot of people that helped us. Dick Brickner, Barry Brown, Jody Pritchett. There was a couple other guys, and they're escaping me right away, but they helped quite a bit. And we installed the packages, and the bees were all made the same size, and we did our best to balance them early on because we wanted to get it as even as possible. And we did a pretty good job, I think. The bees never wanted for food at all. All of them were always babied and fed. And they looked great all the way up until about September. And so we did an alcohol wash the first week of June, and there was barely any mites to speak of. A lot of them didn't even have a mite in the wash. And there was very few that had more than one mite. And so that was early June, very, very low. It wasn't even 0.25%. And we as beekeepers, we don't want to over 1%. Well, then we came back in early August and washed. So 2 months later, and we were averaging over 1%. And so this is a good time to treat. And some of them were a good bit over and some of them were a little bit under. That's just the way it is. You have inconsistent numbers, but the averages were about 1.25%, if I remember correctly. And then we applied our treatment. So we had 4 groups. One was a control group that received no treatment. One was the Randy Oliver oxalic acid sponges. One group was the Apogard thymol. And then which was the full dose, 50 grams twice. And then the other group was oxalic acid at an extreme level, 4 grams per deep box, 5 times in 15 days. We did that because there's only capped brood for about a 12-day odd period. So we're trying to really cover that period really aggressively with high dosages. Long story short, the controlled group, when we came back at the end of September, the last week of September, and washed these colonies, I think the lowest one had 60 mites in the alcohol wash. It was scary high. So on average, they were close to a 30% infestation rate. So for every 100 bees, there was 30 mites in the control group. And these colonies all of them looked good in August, though, even the ones that had received no treatment and early September. The thymol group performed halfway decent. I can't remember the exact percentage, but it did good. The oxalic acid vapor did really well, but it affected the brood patterns for quite a while. However, they overwintered good, and so did most of the thymol. The Randy Oliver shop towels, or not shop towels, sponges, did not perform as a really good knockback. And that's not too surprising. Very few people find that they are a treatment in of themselves. Basically, what we're trying to do with the sponges is that instead of getting a trajectory that's going like this with the mites, which is normal, we're getting a trajectory that's more like this right here. And so the mites are still building up, but it's at a slower rate. And so then when we come back later in the year and treat with our final treatment, maybe thymol, our treatment's not having to kill maybe 2,000 mites. It's only having to kill 1,000, 1,200. So that is primarily in a very basic way what we learned from the experimental yard last year. And the shocking thing was how fast the mites went from very low levels in washes in June, to September in the control group. And imagine that the control group, even though we tried to fix them, we lost 80% of the control group. It was most of the losses that we had. So, yep. Does that answer your question, John? And here's one of the things I like to say just real quick is that one of my goals with Hive Life as we grow is to be able to take the resources that we have, and I want to hire a couple individuals that are way more skilled than I am at this and literally pay them a full-time income and give them all the resources that they need to be able to just do research all year long and tackle these hard things, because that's the problem. I'm trying to do YouTube videos and encourage new company growth and the economy, uh, build a conference, work with kids, um, speaking engagements, and then we're trying to you know do all kinds of different things and yeah, experimental yards too. I'm an idiot. Let me say real quick thank you to Matt Kirkland once again. Matt, really appreciate you being a consistent um, helper and follower of our live chat and supporting us. So you've been rewatching my queen rearing videos, grafted a few weeks ago and dropped cells into 12 mating nukes. Can't wait to see how many make it back from mating flights. Thanks for the videos. Hey, thank you, Matt, and good luck with that. Hope you're getting some good weather down there in the deep south. So Thomas Robinson says, Cayman, weren't you talking about a truck at some point? Oh, yeah, baby. I finally got a decent truck. I am so excited about that. This is our first vehicle to ever have air conditioning since we've been married. So yeah, it's a little long time overdue. It's really nice. The newest vehicle we've had up to this point was a 2007, which we purchased 3 or 4 years ago. So for us, that was a new vehicle, and I like buying used. By the way, it's a good way to buy. But this is a newer truck as far as like it's a 2015. So for me, this is Ford F-350 dually flatbed. You'll see it in some videos. I'm very thankful that we can get something nice. And my kids are so excited because it has the extended cab. They can ride with me now. They couldn't really ride with me in the red truck because it wouldn't fit all four of us. Hey, Robert, thank you very much. Thanks for all the information and answering our questions. Kim and I are new to beekeeping and need all the help we can get. Well, Robert, hey, my wife and I were there not too long ago. At least it feels like it wasn't too long ago. And just keep in mind that it's a learning curve, and just you never get to the point where you learn everything. But there are some truths, and the best thing that you can do is take care of your bees like you would take care of anything else: dog, family. Um, baby them. Take good care of them, and you're going to make mistakes, but that's part of the process too. And be willing to overcome those things. And one of these days, you're just going to be called the honey man, and your wife the honey woman, or however that's put. You got to be careful saying it with ladies. It sounds a little bit more risque. Laurel's fixing to come in here and throw something at me, probably. Kevin Rowland, thank you, buddy. Thanks for the West Liberty, Kentucky video. Enjoy the bit of Be Hazy with your buddy as well. I really pick on Josh too much. He's a nice guy and a good banjo player and a very good singer. And he is working really hard with his bees. And man, it just excites me that this is only his third year, and he has had more success in his third year of keeping bees alive than I had in 5 or 6 years. I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have anybody to show me. He was doing alcohol washes last year and treating in accordance to what they were telling him. And that is exciting because when you can get 20-year-olds involved, maybe the future is bright for beekeeping. Thanks for helping us out, Kevin. Hey, Cayman, really enjoyed. Oh, I've already done that one, Chris. We've already done that one. We can't do it twice. Yeah, I know. Ford fix or repair daily, all that kind of stuff. I've heard it all my whole life, and my grandpa, if he was still alive, he might freak out that I got a Ford. But things change, and that's the thing. Some Ford had some bad years. I really like my Chevy 1983, but Chevys today aren't what they used to be. And basically, if you talk, and I'm thankful that this is where networking is so valuable. Is I called up Bob, I called up Chris Warner, I called up Blake Shook, I text Ian a little bit. I called Harry Vanderpool out in Oregon, who runs a commercial operation. I mean, these guys are, way bigger and better beekeepers than I am. And so I talked to them about vehicles and see what they say. And it really helped give me an informed decision on what commercial beekeepers are using and why, price points and stuff like that. That saves you thousands and saves you a lot of stress. Very thankful for those relationships. And that's really what Hive Life is all about. Some people look at Hive Life for education or for deals on vendors, and Hive Life is that too. But the networking is the true value of Hive Life. Life is all about relationships. I was told today that it's illegal to buy or sell beehives or even move abandoned beehives in the state of Tennessee. Anybody ever heard this? Yeah, Matthew, we're a little strict in this state. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, but nobody's done anything about it. It's been that way since I got into it. So I can't sell you bees. I can't give you bees. I can't give you old equipment that has no bees in it, that has had bees in it, because that is illegal in this state. However, a lot of people still do it in this state, and they do it in Kentucky. They do it in most states. And Tennessee, I'm ashamed to say, is a poor beekeeping state. Our economy could be better beekeeping wise. Our education could be better beekeeping wise. And there's a few people in our state that is holding it back and have for a long time. But laziness gets you nowhere, except backwards. Good evening, Cayman. Have you seen Enel hives from Greece? Possibly an alternative to Apame. Big price difference. Thanks. Hey, Michael, good question. I get a lot of heated discussion over these plastic hives because, of course, we have those that think any type of plastic is evil. I was actually made fun of the other day for using plastic foundation by someone who said that he was a purist. I do think that he's full of pure something. However, there are a lot of opinions on plastic hives. Now, getting to Enel versus Apame, I've had both, and there's really no difference. The Enels do seem to work. I've only had them for a year, but as far as craftsmanship and attention to detail and options, Apame blows it out of the water. It just does. I'm kind of disappointed with the Enel because I look in there where they've injected the insulation and it's created waves inside, and so it's not even. And I don't like that because it's bee space is important. It might look just like an eighth of an inch to me, but to a bee, that's massive. And that affects how the comb's drawn out. And are we crushing bees? And are the frames being stuck to the sidewalls? That affects all of the stuff that we do. I also don't like that the Enels do not seem to fit my equipment. Like there's a lot of things with Apame that I can adapt from wood over, and there are some things that work with Enel, but Enel doesn't seem to be as user friendly when it comes to adapting normal wooden equipment to it. And it just seems overall, you get what you pay for. If I'm going to invest into insulated plastic hives, Apame, or insulated hives in general. About to pick up 2 8-frame nukes. Since they have not oriented to the new location, can I split these on installation or start a new third nuke hive? Live in Coleman, Alabama. Hey, Herb. I'm not a huge fan of getting bees and splitting them that fast. 8 frames, if they're really strong, can be split pretty soon. So I would let them chill for a little bit. You don't really want the forager bees in a split anyways. I wouldn't think so. Leave the forager bees with the original location. Give them a little time to chill out because moving bees is stressful on them. And then come back a little bit later and then go in there and, these bees are looking powerful. They're looking strong. I'm going to pull a little bit from this one, a little bit from that one. I'm going to combine that together with either a queen that I have or whatever system. And now I am going to make my split. Personally, I wouldn't want to do that all at the same time. And that definitely sounds like a good way to get stung to pieces. But there are beekeepers that do that kind of stuff. So it just depends on the quality of the bees. If they're overrunning with brood and bees, then yeah, you can do it. I still think it'd be good to wait a couple days though. Cayman, I don't have the combs to really combat the swarming. Can I split over a double screen, keep it on with the new queen until the flow, combine for production, and make a small split with the new queen? Sounds like you could. I've never done that before. So, good luck, Cobra Strike. If you do it, let me know how it goes. How's that for help right there? Sorry. When it comes to stuff that I really don't know a lot about, I really, I don't think it's fair for me to give an educated answer when I'm not educated on it. I put dead out hives in the freezer. Can I still use the honey frames to feed light hive? Absolutely. I've remember in some years where I've had frames that had honey or sugar syrup feed, and I had probably 30 to 40 deep frames like that. And when we made up our splits, we just plugged them right in, and it was awesome. Should you add pollen patties when installing a new package of bees? A first time beekeeper starting with wax coated plastic frames, no raised comb, just don't have it. Good luck, Robert. Congratulations on all that stuff. It can be helpful. A lot of it depends on your temperature. So if you're in an area where you're getting a lot of warm days and the bees are getting out a lot and they're able to bring in real pollen, maybe you don't have to feed that pollen pad. You don't really have to, as long as there's real pollen coming in. Feeding a little bit can still be beneficial to those bees and helping them really get that first big push of brood from those packages. Now, if you're in an area that is very cold still when you're getting your packages, excuse me, then definitely throw some pollen patties on. And if it's cold, get that pollen patty on them. It'll help them out. That first big push is very important. And now I've got a tickle in my throat. Excuse me. Okay, here we go. Next question, Chris. We are suffering with hive beetles in South Mississippi. I've lost a double deep and 2 splits like a flood of beetles. Are y'all seeing that yet? I hope not. I use beetle traps. I am not seeing that, Jennifer. We do get some cold snaps, and that really hurts the beetle population quite a bit. I was really thrilled when we had right before Christmas some extremely cold weather, and we were getting below zero for a couple days and highs like at 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit. That really hurts the small hive beetle populations for the year and really slows them down for us. And then on top of that, I hadn't done my Christmas shopping yet, and nobody around here really handles the cold well and won't get out. And I was born in Indiana, and I like the cold and love a wood stove. So I got out 2 days before Christmas, and there was nobody in the shops. It was fantastic. It was my Christmas miracle. But boy, I just segued there. Sorry to hear that, Jennifer. I don't have those problems. Maybe try a pollen trap. Not a pollen trap. It is kind of a pollen trap. I got these traps from Rossmann, and you can open them up and put a little bit of pollen patty down in there with some oil, and that helps out a good bit. But if you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, that's really hard to keep down. I don't deal with beetles like you guys do way down in the deep south, though. So Rainier says, I use mating nukes. I see a lower queen cell acceptance after I cage a queen, then add a cell in. I think it's because they have more young brood to make queens compared to when I make them up. I don't know. I've had good success. Personally, the day that I go and grab the queen is the day that I drop the cell. So we go into the mating nukes. That queen, there is brood in there, and we will drop the cell the same day that we take the queens out. And so that seems to work pretty good for me. Is that the best method? Maybe not. But that seems to work really good for me. Are you needing to borrow Ian's first aid kit for that cough? No, we have moonshine around here, but if I'm needing to, maybe to clean out the inside of my 1983 Chevy carb or something, well, then I could get some of that stuff. But I'd like to keep my vocal cords where they're at. Hey, Cayman, have you showed the kids book this evening? I actually did earlier today. So I want to show it again just real quick. So this is a new kids book, and it is a really good book. I would not recommend this if it wasn't really well done. The illustration and the message is really good. It reads really good. I don't feel like a dumber individual after reading this kid's book. Some of them are like that, where I think having the word like festooning and large words like fragrant and different things like that is important. Build their vocabulary. It definitely needs to be accurate too. And just look at that. I mean, you see the wax scales right there, and the bees are hanging and festooning and drawing that comb out. And it's talking about those different things. So for those of you who have kids or a bee library or just a library, this would be a great addition. And it just seems like a lot of times in beekeeping, just because it says bees on it, we feel like we have to recommend it, but I don't feel that way. If it's good, it's good. It's kind of like one of those Christian films where all the actors stink and everyone's like, oh, this was a great film. I'm like, well, the message might have been great. The acting was atrocious and the writing was bad. Okay. Opinions. Alan Lyon. Thank you so much, Alan, for supporting us yet again. I hope your bee season's going good. Appreciate you, buddy. If you have any questions, hit me with them, okay? Jerry DeGroot. Hey, Cayman, we missed you. Just finished the 2023 West Virginia Spring Conference, Honey in the Hills in West Virginia. We got to hear from your buddies, Kent Williams and Paul Kelly. Fantastic event. Well, Natalie was there too. Humberto was there. There was Frederick Dunn was there. There was a lot of people there, and I was made fun of. Let me tell you, they've been blowing up my phone because a lot of people there are my friends and just been picking on me because they know I can handle it, and so they just use me as their punching bag. It's all fun though. I even heard that Larry and Marianne Sears, who are people, Larry was picking on me and making fun of me, and that's great. I just absolutely love that. Larry's like my great grandfather, reborn almost. I just absolutely love that those two. I hope that Laurel and I can grow, be like that one of these days, and still have that much fun and be that happy and be that cantankerous, because that is what Larry is. He's an old coot, and if it wasn't for Marianne almost being voted up to sainthood, he'd probably be in jail. I tell you, he is a tyrant. Is it AFB queen vaccination a terrible idea? Instead of burning hives, they will get inoculated queens. Drifting robbing will move these spores to other hives. Soon every hive will have American foul brood disease. I don't know, because I haven't seen it, Mark, and honestly, I don't plan on trying it anytime soon. I've never had American foul brood. I don't know anybody personally who has had it in Tennessee or even in Kentucky or anywhere nearby. So it's a minor issue. Now, what I've been told from talking to some of the researchers is that this is like a first step, that they are wanting to go from here and maybe go into European foul brood with it, and then go into maybe viruses with it and various things. I don't know. Right now, looking at what it is and how much it costs, it's not worth the labor. It's really not worth the time. Could something good come out of it? Yes. Could it be another thing that just kind of we hear about? It's the new buzzword and that disappears, like magic mushrooms and all that kind of stuff. Very possible. So it has no practical application to me. And American foul brood is a serious disease. And let me tell you, if I identify it, we're burning that equipment. I'm not getting an inoculated queen, because it costs you. I think you got to get the queen and then you have to inoculate it. It's going to cost you like $100 a queen. And then once that queen perishes, the new queen's got to get inoculated. So if that stuff is still inside the hive and it reblooms or whatever, then yeah, it's still an ongoing issue. So keeping keeping your bees healthy and clean and not moving them around any more than you have to would be best. I just don't really see a use for it at this point. I watched a YouTube video about a modified or rolling damari. Supposedly, it can yield over 120 pounds of honey over a season. Have you heard of it? And if so, what do you think about it? So I have heard about it. There are folks that know a lot about it and have used it. I know Landy Simone has talked about it and a few other folks. I've never tried it, never used it. I can get 120 pounds of honey without using it. And that's with pulling a nuke off of that colony and selling a nuke and then making 120 pounds. Now, in a bad year, I won't make 120 pounds, but in a great year, I'll make 140 pounds off of that colony. And it's just single brood management, great queen, no fancy splits, modified, any of those things. So I'm not saying that it's bad, but it's kind of like the folks that keep asking me about the 2-queen system came and, what about doing a 2-queen system and getting more honey? Well, with all the labor that you have to put into something like that, I feel like I can just keep them separate. And it just depends on your system too. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to slice the thing, the orange. That sounded hilarious. Once you get to a certain skill level, but for me, I have my system and it's just Laurel and I. So we're all about trying to just boom, 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 boom through the yard. I don't have time to do all that kind of stuff. So not saying that it's bad. It's just like, I do videos on horizontal hives. I don't use that for my operation. They work really good. Produced 100 pounds out of it last year. But for me, I don't really need that. So I don't try to learn how to do it. Had a queen hatch out sometime late last week in a split I made. She hasn't laid yet, but I know the weather has been pretty poor since. How long should I wait to replace her? Well, typically you give the queen, if she's come back from her mating flight, and let's see, you had a queen hatch out. Okay. And so, you got to give her a little bit of time. Sometimes, it didn't take her a week or so to get things going. But if she hasn't got that colony going within a couple weeks to 3 weeks, something's up. Definitely don't be waiting 4 or 5 weeks. She should be getting it done. Maybe check the colony and see if there's any other issues, but sometimes queens don't get mated properly early in the season. I'm a first-year beekeeper in Western Washington. Do you leave frame feeders in yours year-round even when not feeding? How often should they be cleaned? Great question, Greg. So one of the things that I do is that I don't put any type of, what do you call those things? Not floats, cap and ladder. I don't put any type of ladder system in mine. Mine are just open. If I'm going to put anything in there, you can put a couple sticks in there, just, long strips that'll fit down in there. And if you're worried about drowning, put a handful of straw. And if your bee is drowned with that, then there's something wrong. Healthy bees do very well, especially if you have really cold syrup and you pour it on them, or there's a bunch of bees down in there. But typically that's not a problem unless it's very hot and they're looking for a place to get away. But I leave mine in year round, and since mine are open, I can dump them out just and it's empty. And then if it's a big colony, I don't have any floats or anything in there, and the bees are able to get down in there and they just keep it clean. I really don't like a cap and ladder system for the fact that they can't get all the syrup out quite. And then that spoils and it kind of inoculates the next batch of syrup and makes it ferment a little bit faster. And sometimes small hive beetles will find some debris or maybe a few dead bees down there, and then they'll raise 50 small hive beetle larvae, and then that makes it even nastier and all that kind of stuff. So I really like frame feeders a lot. I can go to Motherload and I get a couple hundred of them shipped to my house for like $6 a piece for like the 2-gallon size, but they don't have any cap and ladders. So frame feeders are not perfect. They are not, but they do work. And there's a reason why they're the most common feeder in professional and commercial beekeeping. They're cheap. I have a frame feeder that's 20 years old. Talk about good return on investment. I don't like how buckets wear out in the sun over time. I don't like how they blow off. I don't like how raccoons get them and boom, pull them out and then have a drinking party in my bee yard at night and then go tell all their buddies. Um, Bucket feeders can work. And I also hate how the bees will plug up all the holes and unplug them. And, I love Bob. Absolutely love Bob Benny to death. Very, very good friend. But I don't have employees like Bob does. And so I don't have anybody like Seth Hill or somebody to go, hey, I need you to unplug all those holes for me. Yeah, thousands of them. I have to do it myself and or get my wife to do it or my kids. And then, child labor laws, all that kind of stuff. Anyways, there's no perfect feeder, but a frame feeder is cheap and it can work. Maybe use a little bit of straw and some floats to help your bees out if you'd like. Keep it cheap and have fun. Let me know how it works and good luck beekeeping this year. Cayman, what do you think of the gas vap? Have you ever tried it? I only have a couple of hives. It seems like it would be good for someone in my situation. I've watched a guy do it right in front of me. I've never used one myself. And it's all right. If you've got a couple hives and you have the time, go ahead and do it. Honestly, though, oxalic acid vapor doesn't do well when there's brood, and might as well just do oxalic acid dribble. Get a syringe, crack the colonies, dribble it a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of the gas vap and its design or a lot of those type of vaporizers. I just don't like it at all. I think they get too hot. And there's more research that I'm learning about all the time that's talking about heat and damage to oxalic acid vapor. And I don't know. It's hard for me to say. I'm spoiled. And after 21 years, I'm all about low maintenance, baby, and surefire things that work for me. Oxalic acid dribble should be used more. It's super cheap. You have to regulate it to 1 milliliter per seam, but it kills better than oxalic acid vapor does. And anybody can make it up for crazy cheap. No expensive tools needed. Wait till your bees are broodless or very close and dribble away. Been tested for many, many decades in Europe and the US now. Hey, Cayman, love your videos. Do you use slotted racks and do you use do you try 9-frame boxes? Thanks. Just got here now. Hope you have a great bee year. Thanks, man. First year coming here to Hive. So first things first, I used to run 9 frames in a deep box. I would do 9 and 9. And that's the way that the old beekeepers taught me how to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I had very good bees with that system. But nowadays I prefer 10s. I just keep 10 in the box. Is the way I like to do it now. Keep them tighter together. That gives the queen more laying room, more area for them to store bee bread away from the queen. You do reclaim a little bit of your money back with the 9, because if you have 1,000 hives and you're able to take 1 frame out of each box and 2,000 boxes, well, that's 2,000 frames that you didn't have to buy. But I really like having 10 in the box, but 9 works great, Mike. So it's just a matter of personal preference. A lot of big commercial guys use 9, have for generations. Now, as far as the slatted racks go, I've never used them. Well, no, I was given one. I did try it out, but I really discontinued it after that. It's one of those pieces of equipment that's not bad. It can help them cool down a little bit and maybe help a little bit, but those type of extra pieces of equipment over hundreds of hives they just get in the way, and they're expensive, and I just don't want to fool with them. So I kind of throw it into the unnecessary equipment category. There's nothing wrong with it if you want to use it, but a lot of these things that we're seeing, these essential oils that are not so essential, some of this equipment that's constantly recommended in bee clubs, they're just excess. Focus on a great queen dead mite, dead mites and good nutrition, and just keep your equipment simple. That's my recommendation. But to each his own. So you don't have to do it my way. I'm just telling you my opinion. Thank you for the live session. I'm new to beekeeping. Could you please help to clarify in the topic of robbing? Do we need to shut the entrance completely when we see this? Thank you so much. So thanks for coming on. You can't shut the entrance completely because typically when robbing's going on, it's during a dearth period. So there's not a lot of nutrition coming in. And more often than not, this is in summer and it's extremely hot outside. And if the bees are closed up, they will overheat and they will die. The best thing that you can do to prevent robbing is keep your colonies strong and healthy. Strong colonies don't get robbed, they do the robbing. So I don't do robbing screens. I don't do a lot of those kinds of things. I try not to get it started, and I try to keep all of my hives very robust. If I make a lot of little splits, we try to take them to the other side of the property, or better yet, to a new bee yard. That can be tricky for hobby beekeepers who only have one location, and there's nothing wrong with that. But robber screens would be what I would look into. If you're concerned about robbing, you can build robbing screens, and basically it makes it to where your bees have to go out of the hive and climb up the wall and then fly away. And there's about a 5 to 6 inch screen that they have to climb up behind it and then fly out. And this really disrupts the robbers because they can smell that entrance and they can kind of see it, but they can't figure out to go around it. And so a robbing screen and a entrance reducer will help. Now, if you're going to reduce them down heavily, you need to have some other ventilation. Upper ventilation, you got to be able to get some airflow. Now, if it's a cold time of the year, it's a little different. But I know people who have reduced for robbing and created a heat issue, and it actually causes the bees to abscond if they cannot regulate the temperature in summer. If they can't control that temperature and keep it where they want it, they will abscond that hive and go to a new location. Cayman, what's the most honey that you've gotten from a hive in a season? I didn't weigh it down perfectly, so it could have been 3 to 5 pounds in either direction, but I got over 150 pounds. I know it was over 150 pounds. It very well could have been 160 pounds, but it was somewhere in that range of 150 to 160 pounds off of one hive. And that was a very good year. Almost all of our colonies produced over 100 pounds that year. And it was just even bees that really didn't have any sense in a normal year making honey were making honey that year. Boy, I hope we have a year like that this year. We will see. What's the best way to make a stand for your hives? I feel like this is not that complicated, but as a new beekeeper, we stress on this. Go Vols. Oh boy. Oh boy. Roll Tide. All right. So, nah, that's all right, Laurel. So as far as making a stand for your hives, hey, there's one thing you could do for me. I believe it's out on the porch. I have a box that has some frame feeders in it. Can you grab that for me? Just the box is small. Gosh, I've been talking too much today. So David says, all that. Making a stand can be really simple. It can just be taking some timbers and some cinder blocks and piling those up. You could just make a stack of pallets. Some people get those like plastic Pepsi pallets or Coke pallets, and they'll stack them up and put their bees on top of that. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about it. Most of mine are on cinder blocks in my home yard. However, I've gone to pallets, and so it's raised about 4 inches off the ground, and that works pretty good. I do get a little bit of skunk problems every now and then, but as long as it's not near at my home bee yard, we'll just shoot the skunks and then let the people that own the property deal with the smell. A lot of different ways to do stands, though. You don't see the box? I bet Jimmy took it out to, I think I remember asking Jimmy to help me clean off the porch, and he took it to the sun. Out there. Oh, well, it's not the end of the world. Where's the honey? Where's the honey? Hey, Cayman, can we start raising queens here in Tennessee yet? Absolutely. You totally can raise queens right now. There's good pollen. It is cold right now, but you can still raise queens in this temperature. You just have to have a really strong colony. There are bees thinking about swarming right now. And if your bees are thinking about swarming, your strongest hives, then you can raise queen cells. So this is when we start raising queens right now. So, I mean, you just got to make sure that when it gets really cold like this during the snap, that You have plenty of bee coverage, always good food. And this is where early in the season, I like to use an insulated hive, and we do, to make our early queens, because an insulated like Apame hive is like 7 times more insulative than a wood box. So our bees are having to do way less work to keep that colony warm, and they're packed full of bees. So they're just fine. They're going to make some great queen cells. Thanks for coming live. I'm in Texas. We will have our first batch delivered next week. I have a flow hive. Would you feed them 1-to-1 sugar water? If so, please explain. Thanks, Bill, Galveston County. All right, good question, Bill. So when it comes to sugar water, 1-to-1 is standard for a comb drawing. It's just kind of the numbers that we teach is 1-to-1 is for drawing and light feeding, and then 2-to-1 is for winter preparation. However, there's a lot of variables, and this is an important subject. So 2-to-1 is very difficult to stay in suspension, especially if you have water with a lot of mineral content. Even if you heat it up to boiling, which will not cause HMF in it, it does not stay at boiling for very long. And you mix that in, you are still probably going to have some fall out of suspension, and that can be a real big pain in the rear end. And so I have a terrible time with our spring water holding 2-to-1 in there. So if you're feeding thick stuff, what I often do is not 2-to-1, but I'll do 5 parts sugar to 3 parts water. So it's a little bit thinner than 2-to-1, which would be a 6-to-3 if you raised it up like a fraction. So 5-to-3 for thick sugar, 1-to-1 can be used for that. However, Bill, if you get to the point where you're like, okay, my bees look like they have a good bit of weight. And what is a good bit of weight? Once your colonies get past 7 to 8 frames of strength, that'd be deep frames, bees covering that. So that's bee coverage, 7 to 8 frames of bee coverage. Your colony should never be without 3 deep frames worth of sugar syrup or honey. So if it doesn't have to all be on 3 specific frames completely full, but you should be able to look into that colony. And if I'm not seeing 20 pounds, which would be about 3 deep frames, then I am feeding those bees, unless there's actively a honey flow going on that's adding weight to them. Bees will not perform well with low amounts of food, and they will not keep as big of a population, and they'll be weaker, and they'll go into winter weaker. So keep that weight on. Now, if you get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm right where I want to be at, but there's no natural stuff coming in down here in Texas, we're in a dearth period, I'd like to maintain that weight but not add a lot of weight, you don't even have to do 1-to-1. You could do half a pound of sugar to 1 pound of water. So that's half as thick as 1-to-1, because keep in mind, nectar comes in much, much thinner than 1-to-1. So there's a lot of flexibility there. And hey, if you're like, oh my goodness, I was on vacation, my bees got really light on feed and it's lighter than they should be, you don't have to feed them 1-to-1. You can feed them a heavy syrup. It doesn't matter. Even if it's July, it's a tool. And so if you're wanting to put on a lot more weight faster, thicken it up. If not, thin it down. Clear as mud. You're welcome. Dean's Bees. Hey, Dean's Bees. Thanks so much for coming on and helping us out here. Thank you for joining us again. And ask your questions if you got any. Whew, catch my breath there for a second. Cayman, what's your thoughts on drone flooding yards? Very, very important if you are raising lots and lots of queens. Now, if you're raising 10 or if you're raising 20, even 50 queens, but they're spread out over multiple weeks and it's prime time, I wouldn't worry about it too much. If it's spring and it's April and it's May and it's June and it's that time of the year when there's naturally a lot of nutrition and there's a lot of drones, maybe up north, that's still July for you guys, then if you're raising just a couple queens or a couple dozen, I wouldn't worry about even the drone flooding yards at all. I never did when I was just doing that many. But when you're raising several dozens at a time or hundreds at a time, it's very, very crucial, especially if you're wanting to breed certain lines. So our mating nukes are actually in between a yard where my dad's are at. They're between my yard here at the house, and they're between other bees. And so it's kind of like a triangle effect. So by and large, if that queen goes in any direction, she is going to encounter some drones. And that's important if we're raising a bunch of queens at a time. But for a smaller beekeeper, I wouldn't sweat it too much. So while we are on this little sugar syrup rampage, I'm just going to say quickly, I saw this post today. It was Tractor Supply essential oil blend, and it said brood booster on it, and it really ruffled my feathers, because what about an essential oil is brood boosting? What is in an essential oil that helps brood out? I guess maybe if you want to really reach out for something and you're like, well, my bees have chalk brood or European foul brood, and feeding this is going to kill some of those pathogens and bacteria, because that is what essential oils are good at, is killing things, especially bacteria and fungi. That's why we use them in a lot of cleaning products and mouthwash, and why we use them in organic agriculture, because they're good at killing stuff. And so if we're putting this in our bees' guts, there's a good chance we're killing stuff in their guts, and research is showing that it does. But for some reason, these people are able to start a business and say it's brood boosting, it's a stimulant. I've never seen healthy bees need stimulated to eat sugar syrup. I mean, it's the craziest thing ever. Uh, if those bees are healthy and they're not taking their food, there either must be a monster flow going on, or there's something wrong with those bees, or that syrup's completely fermented. Heck, they'll take that too if they're healthy. I just don't get this whole sugar, essential oil craze. And I think it's criminal sometimes what these companies claim and how much they charge when there's no brood boosting. If anything, it's going to disrupt our healthy bees microbiome. Some of these have been tested for about 100 years, like thymol. They were using that 100 years ago. It does show positive effects when your colonies are sickly, to clean them out and get them going. However, to say that it's brood boosting, there's no fats in there. There's no protein. There's no trace minerals. There's no nothing. It bothers me. The only advantages I see to feeding essential oils is if you have EFB or chalk brood and you need to kill some bad stuff, or if you need to keep your syrup from fermenting. And that's because it's killing bacteria and stuff from growing in your syrup. Okay, rant over. If we're going to switch to 9-frame supers, when is the correct comb thickness to respace it from 10-frame? Hey, Becky, great question. So if you have a 10-frame foundation box and your bees are drawing it out, and once they get to the point where they've started drawing on 9 frames, first of all, if you have one on at a time, once they've really committed to 7 frames, 6 or 7, no later than 7, put on another foundation and pull 1 or 2 of those up into that. Well, you really want them to quickly accept that next box and start going with that. But once you get to the point where that bottom box and then eventually the second box is getting the 9th frame started, then that's when you can reduce it down to 9 frames and just go ahead and get one of those 9-frame metal spacers. I saw some when I was in North Carolina. Rossmann had them. I know other companies sell them too. But I purchased one of those metal ones years ago, and it still works good. And you can just put that down in there, and then you're good. And the thing of it is, if maybe one wasn't quite as drawn out as the other one, and it ended up being a little bit skinnier, and the other one ended up being a little bit fatter, that's okay. Because once you uncap those with your uncapping knife and extract that honey, the next year when you pop them in, they'll even it back out. So that's what I would do, but definitely don't wait till that super gets too full before you add the other one. Always try to, stay ahead of those bees. Mark Welsh, do you like screen bottom boards and leave them on all year? I've done it in Omaha on one hive and it worked fine, even with our minus 20-degree temperatures. So, Mark, they totally can work in cold weather. A lot of it's just the bees themselves. And I personally like having the option of a screen bottom board, but it's too expensive really to make all of my bees like that. They're not as strong when you're moving bees around. So I think screen bottom boards can be very useful, and especially in hot weather. Etienne up in the Yukon, he does not use upper entrances. They get -50 sometimes up there, super massively long winters, and no upper entrance, but he does have a screen bottom board on these super insulated poly hives. I have left screen bottom boards on and not closed them off. I do feel like bees do better when they have it closed off for the winter. If you, even if it's just you take an insert and put it down there, it's not a complete closed off, but it just cuts down on some of those strong winds that sometimes can push up into the colony. And so I think that's good, but that's just my personal take on it. I prefer solid bottom boards, but I know guys that run them all year round. I think a lot of it just depends on how strong the bees are going into winter, because and I think a lot of it depends on an upper entrance combination too, because if you have an upper entrance and you have a screen bottom board, then when that wind pushes, and if your entrance has a lot of opening as well, a strong wind pushes, it's just pushing air up through there. And I think that really messes with the thermal dynamics. I feel like if you have a screen bottom board, you may consider doing away with the upper entrance, because you really want them to be able to get a nice thermodynamic system in there, but you probably need an insulated cover too. So a lot of opinions out there and a lot of differences in location, Mark. So I don't use them. A lot of successful people do. Where we are at in Oregon, we get a lot of rain. What are your feelings about using screen bottom boards to help control moisture instead of solid bottom boards? My solid bottom boards, I think, do pretty good. I mean, we got a ton of rain. I know Oregon gets a lot, but some parts of Oregon does. But we also get a lot of mud for Christmas and January and February, and lots of rain. And my bees seem to do just fine. No upper entrances. We do get a lot of moisture all winter long. And I feel like, again, a good cluster does fine pushing that moist laden air away from the cluster, because it's generating so much heat. And that's the difference. If we're talking a 3-frame cluster, they're not going to be able to do hardly anything. If we're talking an 8-frame cluster of bees, it's a totally different ball game. They're generating a lot of heat, and that constant heat that they're generating is pushing up, and it's pushing that moist laden air away because it's constantly pushing it up. Now, the only problem is if it's extremely cold and that lid's extremely cold, which if they're close to the lid, they're keeping that warm too, then you won't get that condensation buildup. So this is why maybe more beekeepers should consider, even if it's just for winter, putting an insulated board. There's a lot of pieces of equipment that I kind of harp on that I think are excessive or a waste. But insulation makes a lot of sense. We do it for a lot of reasons. And if the lid is insulated, the bees are going to be able to get that moist, warm air away from them. They'll be able to recapture some of the heat, and the water will run down and then hit those solid bottom boards, and it'll roll out the entrance as long as your hives are not tilted backwards, they're tipped forwards. But a screen bottom board would be fine too. Heck, a screen bottom board with a insert in it will still run it out of the colony. Try it out, Mark. I'm sure you can be successful both ways. Cayman, I watched your videos or a video a while back about using a 5-frame nuke as a queen starter. I'm about to try it, but I'm afraid I can't source as many nurse bees as you did. Any advice first time grafting? Well, bee density is very, very important. We want almost swarm-like conditions. Actually, the closer we are to swarm conditions, the better off we are. And so you really need a lot of bee density. I don't know how many queens that you're wanting to get, but maybe reduce the space down, and maybe if you do 4 frames as a starter, if you have a box like that. But there needs to be a lot of bees in there, and they need to be nurse bees. So there's really not much to do about that. It takes a lot of healthy young bees, well fed, to be able to raise queens, especially in mass. But give it a shot. Maybe you only need 5 queens. But if you're wanting a lot of queens out of it, like 24 or more, you're going to have a really strong starter finisher. Can you combine a queenless hive with a queen right hive? You absolutely can. So the best way to do this is to take a piece of newspaper, poke a couple, take like a toothpick and poke a couple holes throughout it, so that the bees can get a grip on it and start tearing it. But you don't want to make it so big where they can do it really quickly. And one of the most important things that some people forget, especially if it's hot, is to give them some air circulation. So maybe put some dimes or some matchsticks or something in between. The hive below is the one that should be queen right. And then you put those spacers above, not enough for a bee to get out, but enough where they can get some airflow. You can do it up on top too. That's fine. And then as they go through that paper, they're going to recombine it. And maybe giving them a little bit of feed would help as well, because when they go through that paper and they have some food in their bellies, either the colony below or the colony above, they're going to like those bees a lot better because they bear gifts essentially. I received wax coated plastic frames. Should I add more wax? It really depends, Robert. The coating of the wax. So, if you're getting like single coat right cell, it would be better to have a little bit more. Right cell is a Man Lake product. There are some other companies that just do a single thin coat. It can work though, and there's a lot of variables there. But we would really like a coat that, even when things aren't ideal, is still going to work really well. And so an ideal condition would be a natural nectar flow and would be a strong colony ready to draw. Those bees will draw anything, even if it's just a thin coat of beeswax on a single coat like that. So there are people who will get that and they'll have very good success. The problem is when you have weaker colonies that are just building up, and it's harder for them to devote the resources to it. Or if you're in a dearth period, you don't have that nectar coming in, and they're more reluctant to fool with that thinner coating of wax versus one that's 3 or 4 times thicker. So I've got a video on that, Robert. So maybe kind of look at that video. You can put too much wax on there. We don't want to put it really down into the cells. We're wanting to just to coat the edges and the top parts of it. There's really no point in feeling the cells themselves in that plastic foundation. It gets really hard and it's very difficult for the bees to chip that out of there. Cayman, what's your favorite honey? Oh my goodness, that's asking me, which one of my kids is my favorite. there's not an answer to that one. Um, there's a lot of good honeys out there. Real sourwood is delicious. It's not my favorite, but it's in my favorites group. Tupelo honey is very difficult to beat. My honey is the best, so that's my favorite. Yeah. Um, I've had some really good honey from Kentucky. I've the Chiave honey. By the way, I will be doing an announcement on who won this. That really got messed up. A guy hijacked that, and sorry everybody about that. I didn't catch that for a couple of days and was spamming a lot of people on, hey, you won. Hey, you won. Basically, if you don't hear directly from me, and it's never going to be, give me your information. If I say that, we're doing a giveaway, you're not paying for shipping. We handle all that stuff. So sorry about that. We'll be having to change up how we do our giveaways in the future, so we don't have those spammers doing that to us. But the Chiave is a really unique honey. This honey from Good Job Bees. However, it's not my favorite. There's so many good honeys out there. How can you pick one, John? What kind of question is that? That Vermont honey you sent me was very good too. Cayman, what's your favorite kid? Next question. Cayman, Duck River honey uses all mediums. What do you see as advantages and disadvantages? Well, the advantages are that it's light. A lot of beekeepers do that. There's some commercial beekeepers that do all mediums, like the Mixcas down in Florida. However, advantages would be that it's lighter. There's a couple little advantages to it. The biggest problem is it's so much more expensive to go all mediums because you're having to buy more individual boxes and you're also having to buy a lot more frames. So 2 medium frames is a little bit bigger than a deep frame. But the cost difference is not half, that's for sure. And so it's a lot more expensive to do, but there's nothing wrong with it at all. And if you're wanting to keep your equipment light and keep, one of the advantages would be, as opposed to having deeps for all the brood and then having mediums, one of the maybe the biggest advantages I almost failed to mention is the fact that everything is interchangeable. However, I don't want to be looking through swarm cells and making splits with that many frames. Too much handling. Hey, Cayman, how much brood do you leave in strong hives? Sorry, how much brood do you leave in your strong hive when you skim before the flow? I know it can be subjective depending on the hive. Thanks for all the info. Somewhere around 5 frames of brood. Definitely not 6. 5 good frames of brood. 4 phenomenal frames of brood. If we're talking just like bricks after bricks of brood, then 4. And of course, we leave the original location so they still have all the foragers, and we're going to cut them back and really make them go, oh, we just swarmed, even though they didn't. We took the split. That stimuli of, whoa, we just swarmed happened. We've cut them back. Now they're going to go from that mode into another mode, which is long-term storage. Bees are dominated by stimuli, so we want to shift them from the mode of swarming to the mode of long-term storage and honey gathering. So if we can get them to commit to that, they're really, really good at going through the excluders and putting that honey up there in the honey supers. And as long as they don't run out of room and backfill that down to the brood nest, I typically don't have swarming after that, but we will come back a week later after checking them if they were trying to swarm, starting to, and make sure that has got out of their system. We might have to cut the cells one more time. What should I do if I see deformed wing bees? Well, if you see a lot of that, then it can be kind of rough, because there are products out there to control varroa, but there's really nothing that I'm aware of that controls viruses. So that is a virus, and the best thing that we can do many times is try to eliminate all the stressors that we can. So no nutritional stress. We definitely want to make sure that the mite population is reduced and check to see where that is at with an alcohol wash and hopefully get that down. But once viruses take over, it can be difficult to eradicate them sometimes. And I am pretty suspicious that the queen, which I think makes sense to me, just because everything else can get a virus, the queens can come down with viruses. So even if everything else is clean and good, if that queen has viruses in her system and she's affected by it, her brood is going to be affected by it. And so maybe we need to requeen the colony as well to clean that up. Can I paint melted wax onto wax foundation? Doing it on plastic foundation really helps. It does really help. So I actually have a video on that, and we just take a small crock pot, our own beeswax, and we get a foam roller, the soft ones. You don't want one with the hair and stuff like that on it, like for painting, those kinds of things. Just a foam one that'll soak it up, and then we'll let it drip off for just a second. Then you just you don't push down because it'll push too much wax out. You just do a 1 or 2 passes on it, and it adds quite a bit more wax to it, and it does make a difference. So if you type in Cayman Reynolds wax foundation, or wax on plastic foundation, it should pull up. Or if you look in the playlist, it's really not that hard to do. I think with our system, we can do almost 200 sheets an hour if you get it dialed in. Two rollers, 1 crock pot, and just have it set up with a nice table, and boom, just wear them out. How strong should a colony be before we give them more space? So a lot of it depends on the weather. If we're looking at the weather forecast right now and like, oh, all right, it's going to be about 55 or hotter over the next 10 days. And our bees are around 7 to 8 frames strong with really good looking brood. They're going to be growing a lot over the next couple of weeks. Go ahead and give them some space. We definitely don't want them to get too packed, but we're looking at that weather forecast and like, oh my goodness, it's getting down to 14 degrees Fahrenheit, and we don't want to be adding that box quite yet. So it's one of those things where in the early spring, a lot of it's weather dependent. So just kind of keep an eye on the weather, and it'd be better to wait maybe a little bit, get past that cold spell, and just you just have to kind of keep an eye on the bees a little bit more. And that's one of the advantages that hobby and smaller sideliner beekeepers have, that guys that run a lot more hives, one of the advantages is you guys can baby them a lot more, to a degree, and really time it perfectly for the season, where a commercial beekeeper would be like, this is the only time I have available. So ready or not, sometimes here we go, and all that stuff. Cayman, have you ever tried on the spot queen rearing, OTS? No, I have not. I've been asked that question so many times, and it's a good question, but I learned how to graft about 13 or 14 years ago. And once you learn how to graft, I mean, JZBZ cells, and I got the same grafting tool that I had when I started. I made some of my own cell bars, so my queens cost me pennies as it is, and I know how to do it very well, and I can raise hundreds of queens at a time with a grafting system. And so to me, it's so fast and easy. I've never even needed to try any other system, but I have heard some people like the OTS, but I've looked into it a little bit, and I looked at it and thought, well, that looks like a little bit more work than I would like to fool with. How many hives do you need in order to quit your day job? A minimum of 100. It'd be better to have more than that, but a lot of it depends on you and your location. So all locations are different. If you're in Nashville, or you're in a big city where you can move lots of honey for $12 a pound, first of all, you're going to be able to make a lot more off your honey than I do, and move more poundage. And a lot depends on your marketing skills as well. But are you living in that city too, and paying those high prices for your property tax and for your housing and all those other expenses? So you probably do need to make that much money. I think if the sweet spot would be to live not too far from one of those places, so you can get that revenue, but not have quite as much expense of living in the city. And so those folks have different advantages. There's pros and cons everywhere you live. A lot of it depends on your location. Are you in an area that can produce a lot more honey? Do you have a lot of people that are wanting to keep bees in your area? Is it easy to sell nukes? So if you're able to get a premium for your product, you probably could do it off of 100 hives. It'd be very difficult. I think 200 would be better. And a lot of it is keeping your expenses low. Are we spending lots of money on essential oils and probiotics that we don't need? Are we putting a quilt board on every single one of our hives? That gets expensive over 200 hives. Are we using one of those hive top feeders that are $40 a piece from some of the big bee supply companies? I can't afford that. Are we putting a flow hive on each hive? I mean, they're neat and all, but if you have 100 hives, second mortgage on your house might be needed. So there's a lot of different ways to make money. And so there's some guys I know that run 300 or 400 hives, and they're a sideliner. They have a full-time job, and they cut their bees back. They send them off to the almonds. They prep their bees, send them off to the almonds to pollinate. As soon as they get back, they heavily split them, because they're not in it for the honey. They just want to make a little bit of honey. And they split them heavily. They buy queens. They don't take the time to raise them because they got a full-time job. And they just sell a bunch of splits and nukes, and that's part of their income. The pollination's part of their income. They'll make a little bit of honey. They'll cut them back so much they won't hardly have any swarming. And then they will, whatever honey they make, they'll sell that as well. They might do a little bit more pollination, and they'll just focus but they probably won't, because they're busy with their full-time job. And then the rest of the year, they're just treating them and maintaining them, and getting some new queens in there to repeat the next year. And that's a sideline operation. I know a guy, last I heard, he was around 400 hives, and he had a 40-hour work week job. Now, he would hire some seasonal help during those crucial periods, but he knows what he can do and what he can't do, and he has the tools to do it. Forklifts, trucks, assets, land. So there's a lot of variables with this. 200 to 300, I think, would be on average the minimum, but a lot of it depends on your living situation. Can you live off of 30,000 a year, or do you need $90,000 a year? A lot of difference there. Jennifer Apiary, do you sell buckets of honey? And if so, how much? We really kind of got away from that. Occasionally I will do some of that, but it's not a regular thing that we do. We just sell cases of honey to stores, basically. That's it. I don't even hardly sell honey at church anymore. I think they were getting a little suspicious either. You know, not really, but people come up to you at church and like, hey, you got any honey came in? And it's like you're running like a side hustle there at church. And it's like, okay. What's this guy doing over here? What's he really coming to church for? It's for the honey sales. And you just kind of wait for Jesus to show up and overturn the honey tables, so to speak. All joking aside, I really try to keep it simple. One case minimum. And typically if it's just one case, then I've got to be going out that direction for another reason. So typically like 4 cases, 3 cases, no less than 2 cases. And if I can pile it onto another order, I'll do like 1 case of 12. So speaking of the, here we go. It's one of these. Yeah, here we go. So here are that's 1 pound too. Oh goodness. Here we go. So here's some new labels that I just got. I had a friend of mine draw up a picture, and we were just wanting to get something done. And this is something I threw together with him, and I think for just basically saying, hey, I want something like this, he did a really good job. And this is one of the companies we had at Hive Life. This is now our thing. And Tennessee honey, and you've got like a kind of nice bee picture. You can't really see it too good. The gold is too reflective, but that's going to be our new honey label. I'm pretty excited about that. The company that was at Hive Life was called Beresford Company, and they've been designing honey labels for beekeepers, and this is one that I designed and sent them to do. So I'll probably do a video on it because they're very attentive and all that kind of stuff. What's going on? I see. You got your pastor beekeeping too. Oh boy, there's going to be bees in those sermons. It happens. It will happen. I was in the hive today and I thought about how this related to people. And I'm like, oh boy. Where are we going with this? Can I split to prevent swarming and then recombine after making the original hive hopelessly queenless? Will they go back into swarm mode with the original queen? You might be able to do that. I've attempted that before, and you just have to make sure that the original colony doesn't raise a virgin queen in a short order, emerges one, and then that swarms with the colony, or it stays there, and then when you introduce the other queen, it's going to go and zap yours. So you can do that and recombine them back later, but just be careful with it, and you're gonna have to monitor things really good. I don't really do. I've done that in years past, but I typically don't do that anymore. We are going to take Brian Reese, better late than never. Brian, thank you so much for supporting us, man. We hope that you're doing good there in Jersey. Better late than never. Just getting on. We'll have to go back and see what I missed. Yeah, we're actually fixing to shut it down, but we really appreciate you. Really do. Couple things that I'm just going to let everybody know real quick. So, like in the video I had today, this bee book is a great new kid bee book, and I absolutely love things that are educational and fun, and this is both of those things. And getting kids to learn about bees young and not be terrified of them is very important. Our culture has gotten so far removed from chickens and bees and things that should be fundamental and basic. It's kind of scary at times, and books like that can really help get kids interested in a young age and hopefully make some of tomorrow's beekeepers. I have bees still for sale, so if anyone needs any bees, send me an email at tennesseesbees@gmail.com, or you can do hivelifeconference@gmail.com. We have a few spots still left for some nukes, and they'll be ready in the 3rd week of April. By the way, if you're up more towards Hilco, I will have nukes that I'll be delivering up to John. So he's going to help me move some of them as well. So you can order some from John. They're my nukes, and then you can not have to drive all the way down to Tennessee. Cayman, how's your NCAA bracket going? I forgot basketball was even being played. It's college football, man. That's about it. In the South, college basketball is important in some places like Vanderbilt where they can't really play football, or Auburn. But anyways, I digress. Before I start getting into sports, everyone, thanks so much for coming on. It's always fun getting to do these. And just keep in mind, we don't have all the answers, but we try to help where we can. I always learn something from these chats, and we're constantly learning new things and wanting to share those things with you. We have a lot more videos upcoming on products, and we have a lot of new ways you can help out with the future growth of the bee industry. And one of those ways is with Copper Canyon. It is a coffee company that beekeepers run, and I'm going to leave a link down below. If you're ordering coffee and you drink it all the time, it truly is delicious. It's always freshly roasted, and a percentage of all that goes to our kit program for Hive Life, where we can get those kids into the conference. And thankfully, we already have a lot of donations. I already have 36 kids. Full rides, their guardians full rides, so it makes it affordable to get those kids out there. And we'll be sometime in summer, probably around June, sending out applications. Well, opening it up, and then applications can be sent in to us, and we will evaluate beekeepers from around anywhere, really. It doesn't have to be the United States, as long as they'll get to Hive Life. And they'll get a free ride if accepted, and it's going to be a blast. So I guess I can't leave a link down below. I don't know what I've done, but I don't have the options that I normally do. Thanks everybody for coming on. We appreciate you. Happy beekeeping, and we'll talk to you guys later. Vanderbilt. Yep, I did it. See you next time.